All right, good morning, good evening, good night. It is another episode of the Layer 1 podcast. We are having ourselves a good Wednesday here. It's hard to keep time here in crypto, but I have an awesome guest here, PieDAO, Anastasia Belyeva, community and growth, and previously co-founded Fabric Ventures, which I'm super excited to talk about as well. We're going to have ourselves an awesome conversation about decentralized asset management, passive wealth creation, and portfolio management through DAO governance, which is a big rabbit hole in and of itself. But Anastasia, how are you doing today?
Great to be here. Yeah, thank you so much. Super excited to share some of the thoughts and stuff that we've been working on. Yeah, excited to kick things off.
Yeah, in this space, we're super NFT heavy. NFTs are obviously taking off. DeFi is doing super well, but DAO management and DAO governance and all things DAOs are really on the forefront of what's actually coming as it's relating to moving projects forward. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I do want to give a quick shout out here to both of our sponsors on today's episode. We have Formula E High Voltage. That is the third installment there in the Rev Motorsports ecosystem, and in our partner here, Animoca Brands. And we also are working with Uniquely, the first marketplace in escrow that allows you to create and trade NFT tokens with the possibility of materializing them in the real world. So we're going to have our drop there on September 1st. You guys stay tuned for that. But otherwise, let's have a good talk here. Lisbon looks great this time of year. Portugal seems like a really nice spot. But let's go into your background here as you found yourself in crypto, Anastasia.
Yeah, happy to share for sure. So I actually come from Crimea, a region that I can imagine some of your listeners may not even have heard of, but it's that contested region somewhere, between Ukraine and Russia that's been, passed around a couple of times. So I definitely experienced firsthand some of the issues that, a centralized power can mean when unchallenged. And so that was one of the things that pushed me into crypto, into DeFi, and that whole space. Just really kind of trying to envision the world a little bit differently, where you can, organize in the ways you like. You don't need to ask permission, and you can try to make happen what you like. So I left Crimea to go study in St. Andrews in the UK, and then I joined a VC fund when I was in my penultimate year there, and started investing in software in general until I happened to, by pure luck, meet my two future co-founders, Max and Richard, and then co-found Fabric, which was at the time one of the first VC funds to invest in Web3 out of Europe. And that was a lot of fun. That was really great. It was kind of trying to talk to all of the LPs, which are the investors into the VC funds, and trying to convince them that, this is an exciting new space, it's growing, it's amazing, and don't be scared of the fact that everyone hangs out in kind of these meetups and not at fancy events like previously in traditional startup world. So that was kind of the start, and yeah, I stayed there for 3 years. We deployed fund one, kicked off some of the early work for fund two, and then the guys are continuing on, and I moved into the DeFi space.
Yeah, I want to stick on this story really quick because a lot of the founders we have on are either from, Australia or they're from the US. How does the space differ when you kind of make your way over there and into Europe? I'm sure you've had many kind of interactions with people in the US and in the industry over here. How are the founders different? How is the space different maybe in Europe than over here in the US?
These are quite different. Actually, I would say the relationship between the founders and VCs is quite different in Europe than what I've seen in the US. Things tend to happen a little bit slower, which is something I'm not super happy with. I really love the kind of the US approach of, breaking things fast, going into new spaces, not thinking too much before backing exciting, bold ideas. I think here in Europe, we have that barrier where some of the VCs are harder to convince to back things that are bolder. And I think it's a problem, but now I'm seeing a lot more funds emerging in the Web3 space and even more niche than that. So hopefully we'll see some more changes there. But it's a shame in general to previously have seen some of the European founders going for funding to the US and not sticking here in Europe. But I think we're definitely seeing the change in that now with the Web3 movement.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into PieDAO and the asset management portfolios and whether, DAOs can get into these early stage rounds as in like VC movements there. But just sticking one more question here on yourself, thesis as far as, early venture capital there. I'm not familiar with the timeline for Fabric. So was that like a 2017 timeline where
Yeah,
you guys were investing? So what was your
we
thesis
started off
back
that.
then? What were you guys looking to invest in at that point?
So we started off obviously trying to define what the Web3 space even means, right? It kind of didn't really exist as a terminology back then. And we kicked off sort of trying to map out the infrastructure pieces that had to exist before you can really go down any of the verticals. And so a lot of our early investments were in that sort of infrastructure layer phase. And then slowly it kind of started developing more into the open economy, which is really DeFi and related aspects. So that's been the focus for the past while. And obviously, NFT things are definitely a core part of that as well. So it's kind of evolved that way.
Yeah, I want to get into the NFT DeFi synergy here in a second, but DeFi really had its moment before NFTs, right? Like I believe 10,000 years ago in 2020, DeFi really kicked off, right? Like we had all of those yield farming events. You had just a massive movement. So tell me, what was your experience there from that DeFi kind of craze there in the summer of 2020? Were you guys getting in early stages there, or were just I want to kind of get a full experience?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Indeed, it does feel like ages ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly the feeling back then. I think, a lot of the projects got onto that yield farming wave super early. And, if you were right at the wave to start offering these incentives as a project, you would see progress happening over like, weeks where, a project would jump from kind of like the last levels of CoinGecko to number one kind of thing, which is really kind of crazy to see. Like without much work or without much changes to the roadmap or any product related stuff, you could see a huge change in the kind of the presence and the obviously the market cap. We jumped on that a little bit later than many others. I think the way we've always approached it at PieDAO was we kind of try to get the fundamentals done first before jumping too much into attracting liquidity and sort of working on any kind of like high growth initiatives. And so we kind of held off a little bit in the beginning and then did a couple of such liquidity incentives later on, which had their results. Definitely, we've seen some good progress on the products that we've experienced it with, but I think not really at the same level as some of the first first projects to try that out.
Yeah, it's always a challenge kind of mixing really high level information with more detailed conversation on what you guys are doing at PieDAO, but we're going to try. You mentioned that you weren't there at the genesis of PieDAO, but really kind of want to get it in an origin story as well as kind of an overall view. What is PieDAO? Why should someone get involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. Indeed, I was unfortunately not there when the co-founding team and sort of like the core team has conceived of the idea, but the vision behind it is really that the 99% of the population have always been excluded from wealth creation, and they've just never had the chance to compile and to be able to maximize wealth rather than run for salary their entire life. So most of the early community members of PieDAO have experienced that firsthand. They've seen their families have to work super hard, full time, and get salaries, while some of their wealthier friends would be just investing and getting a bunch of interest from that and getting returns that their own families would never be able to see. And so that created this kind of sense of unfairness and desire to change that. And that was really the fundamental idea, just to try and offer the tools for wealth creation to the wider audience and make it accessible to anyone with the internet connection. And that still remains the core of the PieDAO mission. The products, which are pies, as we call them, a lot of the puns in the ecosystem are obviously baking related. They are meant to be portfolios that give users diversified exposure to assets within the crypto ecosystem, while also helping them accumulate wealth by generating passive income through all of these, crazy, complicated DeFi native mechanisms like staking, yield farming, etc. So that was kind of the idea from the beginning, and we're still at it.
Yeah, and I want to get into the DAO governance perspective of how people can get involved in the decisions on the platform. But just from staying high level here, if I'm a new user, maybe I really like the things that you were kind of breaking down there. The first step for me is to essentially get involved in maybe buying up one of the indices, or what would be the best way for a new user to get involved in what you guys are doing?
So if you're a new user to crypto itself, then I would recommend probably getting the most balanced, the most risk-averse portfolio you could possibly get your hands on, which in our case is BCP. And that's something that gives you access to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and DeFi in a balanced way. And so, you don't need to do your research on every single project within the DeFi ecosystem. You can just get, a one token kind of exposure to both the blue chip type of tokens and also the upcoming higher growth potential type of projects. And I would say, to get that, you jump on the website, PieDAO.org, and then you can just buy that token, BCP, through the PieDAO website, without having to do much more work of accumulating the assets underneath. And there's actually a cool way you can do that through the oven, something that we came up with to actually help those newcomers who kind of get scared of the gas costs. Like sometimes you open up, Gas Now, and you see this crazy fees, and people who are just coming into the space are like, wow, this is insane. This is so much higher than in banking or anywhere else. Why would I do that? And so to help those people, we've come up with this infrastructure that helps them essentially share costs with other users by pulling transactions together and then converting them from ETH in one go. And that obviously reduces the gas cost on every individual user. So that's probably the easiest way. And then if you are a new user of PieDAO, but you already understand your ways within crypto, then you can pick a vertical, let's say, NFTs or gaming, and then you can just buy a portfolio of that space.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the batching that you guys are doing within that a monthly time frame. I'm guessing, definitely saving fees there. It could be on a different timeline. Don't quote me there, but I really like the batching. But I like the indices as well, in the fact that you guys are actually using DAO governance to actually think about this, right? Does a specific proposal need to be passed on the platform in order to change an index or create a new index?
Yeah, that's honestly my favorite part. I think that's what part of the reason I got in. I kind of think that if you want to change the way wealth is distributed, you cannot use the old structures, right? You got to use the new systems for coming up with that. So the DAO part comes in here, and the way it works currently is that anyone can become a member of PieDAO by holding the governance token, DAO, and your first kind of user interaction will be probably somewhere on Discord or Twitter, where you become part of the community, you chat with other people, you casually brainstorm some ideas. When you want to take it forward, you can propose something on the forum, and then others can comment, can discuss, edit that further into something kind of actionable, and then ultimately you can put it to a proposal, gas-free, for people to express their interest on. And then ultimately, when a decision needs to be made on actually creating a new pie, then we would make the decision on Aragon. So we would put it on an actual on-chain vote. That's currently the system.
So when you guys first started the DAO, was it on Aragon? We had those guys on, I believe, about 2 months ago. But there's various, I guess there's a spectrum of how large DAOs are and how complex they are. Some just have a snapshot and a multi-sig. Others go as far as like having the Aragon governance and things like that. What has been the experience working with Aragon to, house all these like DAO frameworks and structures?
It's been pretty smooth so far. Yeah, we've had our DAO based on Aragon from the early days, and it's been pretty great. So we've been obviously using Snapshot for gasless voting just to make it simpler for the users. But now, actually, I know Aragon is rolling out their own gasless voting, which is really great too. So hopefully that will come out, in full speed soon, and we'll be able to join that as well.
That would be good to do in house. Snapshot better look out.
Yeah. It's pretty easy, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the pies you mentioned. Again, you can see that I love indexes, but I have the play index here that houses, and I'm gonna bring it up. Let's see if I can make sure I get it. So mainly Axie you got, and that has to do most likely with the price increase. But it's the allocation here within this pie in this index is Axie at 40%. Man, wait. 60%. My eyes are getting bad. Mana, Engine, Sand, NFTX, Rari. So basically the idea for the people who aren't well versed in indexes, like if you don't want to get maybe have to do the work and the to get exposure to all these assets, you can just buy play and then get exposure to the entire index of different NFT projects. So from the index perspective, what is your favorite maybe that you guys have on the platform? You guys have DeFi large caps, you have YPI, and you also have USDC or USD plus plus, which it looks like just your stablecoin index. But just kind of take me through those indexes and maybe your favorites.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's hard to pick the favorites, honestly, in the portfolio. But on the play index that you've mentioned, yeah, indeed, I love that one. Just because I think it so timely covers, obviously one of the hottest areas in crypto right now. And the reason is not even just to ride the hype wave, but it's mostly because because it's so hot. Obviously, there's a lot of newcomers who are hearing all about it on Twitter, on Telegram conversations, and they want to be part of it. But to actually make an informed decision on which tokens to back, you got to put time in, and you got to be a little bit of a sophisticated investor. And otherwise, you're going to probably get burned, right? And so that's something that I think is important to try and help users not do, because otherwise we'll see another wave of people getting disillusioned with crypto, getting burned. All of these different things are not very helpful for the ecosystem. So I think playing that sense is very timely and really great. And as you mentioned, you can basically hold one asset and get exposure to not just gaming, but also the NFT ecosystem, which is something that we've partnered with NFTX to achieve. So they were the partner who helped us plug the gap on the NFT area. And otherwise, I think that the DeFi large cap has been super popular across our user base. It's been really, like one of the favorites. So yeah, I would say these two have definitely been doing great.
So the other products that you guys have listed here, you mentioned the ovens where you can kind of get involved in some different products. What products are those specifically from the oven perspective? Is that going to be the different index tokens that you can then, instead of going on Uniswap and then purchasing, you can go onto this oven and actually join that buying product via this oven?
Yeah, so if you think of it, the ways to get access to a Pi portfolio is either to buy that portfolio token somewhere on an open market, if it exists, or to mint it from scratch, right? And to mint it means actually having in your wallet all of the underlying assets, or buying all of them from the market and then minting them into the Pi, which obviously is quite gas intensive and costly. And so what we are offering users to mitigate that is to go through all of that complexity of buying individual assets, minting them into the Pi, but kind of in the background where they don't actually have to do it. They just press one button through the oven, and then all of that happens in the background for them while the gas costs are shared across users. So that's been so far super well received by the community. Obviously, like people love simplicity, and it makes things much easier to access the products.
Yeah, I have one more product here that I want to touch on before we move on to the governance portion, to the DAO portion, which is going to be fascinating. You have the farm pools set up. I see the sushi and balancer pools you have here. Do you want to talk on anything specific as far as the pools are concerned? I know you guys, again, have the DAO ETH. You have play in DAO, which is great. But just take me through some of the pools and the staking you guys have set up currently.
Yeah, great question. So this was all part of our initiative called Dopamine, obviously with DAO part of it. And the idea was to try and push a little bit on growth for some of these products and to offer some of the higher incentives for providing liquidity to the pools. So, naturally for any product to become mainstream, to become successful, you got to make sure it's easy to access, and having them available on exchanges, having them available to easily buy is key. And so, part of the initiative to make that possible is this dopamine program, where we are basically allocating DAO rewards to these specific pools. So the ones that you've mentioned are kind of trial pools to really see how this works and how the users react to it, what levels of liquidity we see, etc. And And the reason we made DAO the interim asset there, so as you've seen, we have DAO ETH and then DAO Play, for example, instead of linking Play with ETH. And that actually makes a lot of sense from the governance token perspective, because that sort of places it in the center of the ecosystem, in the heart of all of the PieDAO products. And it creates kind of an additional value add to the token holders, as it links everything together quite nicely. So we thought that through, and we decided that made sense. This is still a trial, so we'll see how things go. And if we are happy with it, we'll probably roll out more of the pies into the same program.
Yeah, I want to touch on the DAO and token economics here, and what basically users can get access to, right? They have the access to create proposals and vote on proposals. What's the future maybe use case here and utility there for DAO as we go forward? Do you guys have things in mind, or things we maybe haven't touched on yet?
We do, more than you can imagine, actually, and I love that question. So we actually have something cooking that will be released in early September. So I can share a little bit, kind of a sneak peek on that with your listeners, but more on that is coming in the first weeks of September. But just to kind of maybe give a rough outline. So DAO is the governance token that is the fuel of the whole PieDAO wealth creation machine, right? So anyone in the world can get DAO, and by holding it, you get the right to participate in decisions, to make proposals, to propose rebalancing of existing portfolios, to vote on strategy for the project overall, etc. So everything pretty much is part of that. Now, to reward that, you obviously need to make sure that the incentives that there are for those people to make the right decisions. And what we are now rolling out is a way for all of the DAO revenues, including the fees from all of the products, so all of the pies, as well as other activities that the DAO does, through yield farming, through whatever other revenue generating activities we participate in, will actually be distributed to the DAO holders. So that is something that we'll do, and we've been preparing for a while, obviously making sure that everything is bulletproof, and the community has been really looking forward to it. So I think that will take things to a whole new level in terms of, if you think of it, most people kind of think about future of work as, at best having some beers in the office kind of thing, or having flexible working hours, or being able to work remotely. I actually think it's going to be DAO-led, where you can contribute your expertise to DAOs while being anywhere in the world, not being tied by specific working hours or having limited vacation days, and actually get paid for that on a monthly basis. I think that's a pretty cool vision, and that's something we're going towards.
It's really about the users and the community members actually capturing full value of what they're creating.
Exactly.
Like if you do it from the beach in Hawaii, or in Lisbon or anything, it doesn't matter as long as that value is good and it's being captured.
And also who you are shouldn't matter, right? So what sometimes I feel very weird about is that, today in all of these companies or traditional financial institutions, you have so many barriers to entry to who can actually become the decision makers and the selectors when it comes to portfolio. And if you think of it, it really doesn't make sense, because you're missing out on a huge amount of value in places where those people would just not notice them, right? They will overlook those places. And with DAOs, you can actually include in the governance process anyone from homeless people to people with pseudonymous identities, to whoever they are. You don't really ask questions. You don't ask who they are. If they're expert enough, and clearly they're incentivized cryptographically to make the right decisions, then why not have them on?
Absolutely. I think the traditional financial system, it's almost like a birth lottery, right? Like if you were born in the right place with the right people, maybe you get involved. But now that's been decentralized. It's been really, destabilized, and anyone can participate. So that's awesome. I really like the work you guys are doing with PieDAO. You mentioned all the different puns, because the financial system, almost in that same conversation, has been made to seem very complex when things can be explained fairly clearly, and people that aren't familiar with the financial system can get onboarded. And it seems like you guys are approaching it from that way.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, one of the trends that I'm actually really keen on, that I think PieDAO fits in very well, is the social micro investing. As you've seen with the publications and the media world, where previously the huge media publications owned the entire space, and now you see all of these influencers, microbloggers, podcasters, obviously emerge that take over and that people listen to. I think we're going to see similar shifts within the investing space, where you don't really need to work with central institutions to decide what to invest in. The younger generation, the sort of the millennials, are probably going to follow the more decentralized route, where they can see what their friends are doing, they can discuss it in communities, make joint decisions, and sort of follow that route. And I think that's where portfolios that are composed by that much wider community of people makes a lot more sense.
So is there any like roadmap timelines here for PieDAO to get involved? You've co-founded Fabric Ventures. That's more of a venture fund, obviously. PieDAO is more focused on indexes and actual passive investing right now. But is there a potential for PieDAO to get involved in early stage projects and like venture investing? Because it feels like a
That's a great question.
it feels like a perfect thing for a DAO to get involved in, and we have already seen some created.
So that's a really great question. Actually, I have some thoughts on that. So I mean, from the PieDAO perspective, as things stand currently, when you choose which assets to include in portfolios, like, for example, DeFi plus S, which is the small cap / emerging DeFi projects portfolio, you're kind of, in a sense, making those decisions, right? You're betting on which projects you think are going to be the highest growth, and you're deciding what to include in there. So to some extent, it requires the due diligence and the thinking that a VC would have. On the other hand, the question of whether DAOs would be the right type of entity to actually take on the role of VCs, I'm actually unsure. And the reason is, from an entrepreneur's perspective, I think sometimes when you're super early and you're building something, early on, that level of openness and the level of completely public everything may actually hurt you, and not give you the opportunity to roll out something that makes sense.
Hmm.
If you know what I mean. So, a VC obviously needs to share whatever data they have with their LPs and that sort of stuff. So you have that relationship. And so if you completely open that up into a DAO-like structure, then a lot of the things that founders could have appreciated being private in the first month, sort of weeks of the project, may actually kind of harm them later on. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is actual decision making. So what I think the DAOs can be the most helpful in is the part where they analyze and source, and kind of like the crowdsourcing of due diligence, I think makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly what we do at PieDAO. When it comes to committee-like decision making, right, where you're actually going to deploy the funds into a particular project, I think, as VC stats and sort of like data shows, the best companies to back, or the best projects to back, tend to be the ones that everyone disagrees on, right? So to some extent, reaching a consensus within a DAO on super early stage projects that are, just at the level of conception is going to be really hard. And if you do, they're probably not going to be the moonshots. So I think there's space for both. In that sense. So, if you want to back, stuff that is super, super early, like pre-seed kind of conception level stuff, you probably are going to need something like a VC fund. On the other hand, if you're creating portfolios of existing, up and coming projects, then obviously, indexes, portfolios, and stuff like PieDAO makes sense.
Yeah, I would love to see the proposals in the contentiousness of the community when they're kind of talking about an early stage product. I think that would do a lot for just discussions within a community there. And I like the point you made as far as being open. I think DAOs often work in the open, like you're talking about. So everything's transparent. Well, you don't want a lot of those things that are happening early stage to be transparent in that sense. So really great points. I think you touched on those pretty heavily. I got a comment from the community here. Nicola DeMarco saying, I wouldn't say necessarily getting involved in early stage products or projects, but surely supporting community-led initiatives and products. And that takes me to a question I have about this meta governance point you guys make on the platform and this idea of like protocol politicians. So you basically have via PieDAO, all of these, I guess, people who are investing in a Wi-Fi just indirectly or through your guys' product. So that gives you guys a lot of weight when it comes to maybe voting on bigger things within a Wi-Fi or all of these decentralized organizations. What is the idea of meta governance there, and what has been the on the ground kind of experience there with PieDAO and involved in other projects?
I think that's actually a very important point as well. So meta governance, I think, is almost like a must when you are in the position where, PieDAO is, and you do accumulate that voting power. You kind of have to really try and positively influence the communities that you're part of. So that's something that we introduced as part of the PieVotes initiative. It hasn't existed before then. So we've had this sort of two different types of products. And the second one, the kind of upgraded version, was called PieVotes, which made meta governance possible. So we're definitely expecting to see more and more participation in the underlying protocols through that. And then the other, the other thing is sort of when you're obviously, well, I'm actually trying to think of how not to give out too much data on the stuff that's coming out. There's something interesting to say on that. In terms of the way that the value will be distributed back to the DAO holders when it comes to the revenues that the DAO generates. I think one thing I can definitely say is that we're trying to keep in mind as much as possible the synergies with other DAOs and with other projects out there to make sure that the way this is done benefits them as much as possible rather than harm them. So if your listeners would like, actually, they can see a lot of that discussion happen currently on the forum. So I would love to direct everyone to that and sort of maybe contribute. But I think, the idea of meta governance and in general being synergistic with the ecosystem is something we're actually currently diving into quite a lot.
Yeah, so we see the difference in how someone gates their community with their token. And you being a community manager and trying to grow the community, is it something where I have to have the DAO token to get access to the Discord, or can I come in freely and then you guys introduce different features for DAO as I go? We've seen FWB and a couple other big kind of DAO organizations say, hey, you need to own a certain amount to actually even participate in our community. What is the way that PieDAO kind of approaches this question?
No, we don't have those limits. So you can join the Discord at any point in time. You're welcome to obviously, look around, see if you actually resonate with the ideas. I actually think it's quite important. You don't have to commit before seeing what you're getting into, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. So getting to know the community, seeing what levels of discussion happen, you can absolutely do without owning DAO. And then if you feel like this actually resonates and makes sense for you, then you can get a hold of DAO and start actually voting on decisions. But that's the next level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about play. Obviously, we're super, leaning into NFTs within this network. You mentioned kind of the DeFi NFT synergy and different products and projects that are in the works. What can you kind of break down for our community here?
Well, the projects in the works, at PieDAO, there's currently, I don't think there's any NFT related projects coming out. No, I was just going to mention actually something that I find very interesting that's coming out from someone I know in the crypto ecosystem that I found really cool. I mean, zero affiliation with it whatsoever. I just saw it recently on Twitter and I thought it was really cool. Project called Rewilder, where you can actually buy an NFT of that represents a piece of land somewhere, and that land will be preserved by that organization for rewilding the earth. And so it's kind of linking NFTs to the whole global warming and all of these different global challenges that we're facing in a very cool way, I found. Because it's one of these things that I find all of the social change is very hard to link to capitalistic means. You tend to have either charitable stuff that is hard to move forward, or you have capitalistic initiatives that are not very good for the environment or for the world. And I found that project to be very, very cool. And hopefully, we'll see it work. Check it out. It's called Rewilder. But again, like no affiliation, and actually don't even know too much detail about it, but just found it cool.
Yeah, free plug for Rewilder there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We're going to see the DeFi space, the NFT space continually grow. Again, I love the indexes you guys are working with and all of that. I think we've gotten through most of PieDAO and what you guys are doing. I love the DAO conversations because, that they're super informative, but they can also get like down a rabbit hole very quickly. From your DAO perspective and the community perspective, has there been any like contentious proposals or things that maybe got, put to the community that maybe got put like that you thought would pass and then didn't? I'm always in these early stages of kind of DAO growth. I'm always interested in those as opposed to the ones that get past 100% flying colors.
It's a very good question. I'm trying to remember the stuff that was contentious at all. I think, not necessarily contentious, but the creation of Play, the portfolio that we talked about around NFTs and gaming. Originally, the community was pushing for something just gaming related. And then I think at one point we saw some proposals emerging around adding NFTs. And it was an interesting example where it was actually very, very close to launch already, just as a gaming token, as a gaming portfolio. And then the community kind of turned things around and kind of put a stop to it, and then decided to vote in the extra NFT element and get this partnership with NFTX and make that happen. So I thought that was a very cool and kind of like a powerful thing to do, to be able to actually jump in and change the direction like that. So I think that was cool. Otherwise, in terms of the ways DAOs work, in my experience and what I've seen at PieDAO, I think it's you often have a lot of the same people participating in decisions, obviously. And so what we're now trying to do more and more is try and incentivize further active participation from the wider number of people. And incentives is one part of it. But the other part of it is just having structure to it, right? What I've seen quite often is that a lot of people propose stuff and comment on ideas somewhere on let's say Discord, but it's a different topic to take it all the way to the vote, where you actually have to produce some work. You have to prepare a model if you're talking about a new pie or whatever that is. Sometimes there are multiple steps involved to take it from discussion to a ready proposal. And so what we're trying to come up with, and I'm sure we're not the only DAO out there who's facing that, is a more clear structure and an easier way for people to take things forward. And yeah, obviously, whatever we come out with is going to be public. So hopefully it can benefit some other DAOs out there as well who are trying to streamline their processes. But I think that's a very important one to solve. I really love actually what UMA are doing with KPI options and stuff like that. I think that's a huge thing for DAOs and for communities in general, to try and kind of unify towards common goals and not just passively hold a token in the hopes that it's going to appreciate and everyone is going to live happily ever after, but actually trying to productively direct that community towards an agreed goal. And I think that's very cool.
Yeah, UMA did that setup basically for those out there. They're setting essentially payments for initiatives actually carried out, as opposed to saying, "Hey, just take this allotment of funds and go do with it what you will." So, really cool point. I mean, when you set up a DAO, you're setting up additional complexities that can lead to things not getting done, right? So I think that's what you're kind of talking about. We have a DAO here on the network where people are pushing proposals within the community, and that process is so necessary. So I'm definitely looking forward to what you guys put out for sure.
We'll share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything as far as PieDAO is concerned that we didn't touch on, maybe anything on the DAO front or whatever you guys have, I think we covered it greatly here, but anything we might have missed, definitely feel free to share right now.
Well, I mean, the only thing I'd love to mention is would be great to, see more of your listeners try and participate, whether, they want to actually govern the ecosystem and get a hold of DAO and try to make some decisions on what to do next, especially given what's coming out in terms of the value that will be distributed back to the DAO holders, or if they like to just try out some of the pies. I think that'll be really fantastic.
Yeah, from your personal perspective and personal investing perspective, what is something you're looking at? Are you looking deep into maybe, DeFi, or do you see the NFT space kind of continuing to move? Or I just kind of want to get your broad thoughts on the ecosystem. Are we due for a pullback? Not financial advice, of course.
So I actually really, really love the synergy between DAOs and DeFi. I'm really, really big on that. I mean, NFT space is huge as well, and I'm obviously seeing it happen. I think personally, I'm just less involved in it and kind of not as close to the ecosystem. But I think the intersection of DAOs and DeFi has so much potential that we haven't even nearly tapped yet. Just in terms of how well it works, that the tools for wealth creation really need to be carried out by new means. They cannot be done by traditional companies. They cannot be done by centralized organizations. They have to be done this way. And I think we'll see way more happen in that area. So yeah, I'd say stay tuned for that.
I love it. I love it. So Don R is saying PieDAO says they are hiring. Are you guys in the process of hiring out
We
there?
are indeed. I'd recommend everyone to check out the Angel link. We've got a couple of roles open. Great point, actually. Thank you for the shout out there. We are looking for someone to join in the community and marketing side. We're always looking for engineers, including blockchain and solidity, obviously. We've recently had a couple of amazing hires that joined in the past couple of months. So yeah, we're in a very active process right now.
Amazing. All right, last question. This has been an amazing convo. I do have a book recommendation question for all of our guests here on the channel. So, do you have a book recommendation? Could be crypto, non-crypto, for the people that are out there listening.
Great question. I would say Anne Ryan Fountainhead was one that I really loved that I read a couple months ago. Yeah, I'd recommend it. It has nothing to do with crypto whatsoever, but I think it has a lot to take out for life in general, including crypto.
Awesome. Anastasia Belyeva. I'm struggling with that, but I'll
You're
get
doing
it
great.
down.
You're doing great.
Yeah. We had a great conversation here on PieDAO. If you guys do want to check that out, I will link in the description now as well as in the chat, and you can check out everything they're doing with their decentralized asset management platform here. Really excited to see your guys' growth, and I love the DeFi DAO synergy. So thank you for coming on here today, and hopefully I'll have you guys back on in a couple months.
Thanks so much. Likewise, really enjoyed it.